Welcome to the Arizona Author Series. This event was recorded on January 18, 2024. The Arizona Author Series is supported by the Arizona State Library Archives and Public Records, a division of the Secretary of State, with federal funds from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. We are pleased to hear from Clottee Hammons, author of the book Indiscernibles in Arizona, an anthology of the Black Arizonan Experience. Clottee Hammons is a second-generation Arizona native and granddaughter of a 10th Cavalry Buffalo soldier. Respected locally as a visual artist, curator, poet, writer, activist, educator, and prevention specialist, Hammons views her special calling as a community builder. She is the creator and ongoing facilitator of the Emancipation Marathon, a literary tradition that honors the victims of American chattel slavery. The Emancipation Marathon will celebrate its 28th season in July 2024 in collaboration with Changing Hands Bookstore in Phoenix. Ms. Hammons created the multifaceted The Great Migration, Indiscernibles in Arizona project. Her work has earned the following recognition: the 2021 Governor's Arts Award, the 2022 Celebration of Women Legends Award, and 2023 Empowered Magazine Award. We are pleased to hear from Ms. Hammons and glad you can join us.
And today's presentation, can you see that?
Yes,
by the way?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Today's presentation, I'm dedicating most of all to my siblings. And you can see them in the upper left-hand corner of my screen. My sisters, the twins, Linda and Lydia Hammons, my brother, George Hammons, and of course, there I am sitting at the bottom right hand. And in the center of the screen is my great-grandmother, Effie Stamps. And when people think of Arizona, they don't generally think of Black people in Arizona. And she migrated here from Mississippi, Natchez, Mississippi. And at the bottom of that painting, there is a red line because Black people could not live north of Van Buren Street when she came here. And on the right side of the screen, you at the very bottom, you see gun-toting Confederate Jack Swilling, and you see super scrutinizing Reverend Father Victor George Butcher, who we grew up under that sort of cloud of what was expected of us. And the quote that I'm looking at, oops, I'm sorry, let me go back there. The quote is very true. Even if I should speak, no one would believe me, and they would not believe me precisely because they would know that what I said was true. And what I have to say about Arizona today is true. The book Indiscernibles in Arizona, on the hope and reality of being Black in Arizona, it came about as a collaborative call by Emancipation Arts LLC and the Virginia G. Piper School of Creative Writing, with a special thanks to Jake Feinberg at the Arizona State University. And it was a call to Black Arizonans to submit their individual perspectives and experiences. The contributors to the anthology span a range of ages and occupations, with the facts of their experiences being Black in Arizona the main commonality. And before we begin, there is a challenge here that I am going to offer, and that is I want to acknowledge the many well-intentioned educators that haven't been exposed to this subject matter. Very often I do workshops and people say, gee, I didn't know that. I never heard that. They didn't teach us that. So there's often a reflexive response to stray into the histories of other races and ethnicities when discussing or presenting Black histories, which deflects from the topic, and sometimes that's intentional. Black people are subjected to varying assertions at almost every engagement of Black history. So please make note of the what about statements and questions for your own edification, but do not enter them in the chat. The foci of this engagement are the experiences of Black people migrating to and living in Arizona. And at no point in this discussion will we be using the term BIPOC or anything of that nature. So please don't attempt to deviate from this particular topic. And I'm trying to get to the next slide and it won't let me do it. Okay. Don't you just love Zoom? Indiscernibles in Arizona on the hope and reality of being Black in Arizona is one feature of a multifaceted, ongoing Great Migration Indiscernibles in Arizona project. That project actually has a blues CD that we released. It has a traveling exhibition. I've commissioned an artist to do a portrait, and we made prints of one of the local blues legends in Arizona. And so local historians generally exclude African Americans from the factual narrative of the state, or at best include them only as footnotes. The Great Migration Indiscernibles in Arizona is a multimedia examination, acknowledgement, and dissemination of how Black people came to settle in Arizona, as well as their past and present day experiences and contributions as Arizonans. And I'd like you to take a look at the cover. And in the forefront, we have an Army veteran. And typically and I have done outreach work for a very long time here, but typically Black female Army veterans get little acknowledgement here. But she's a leader and she is a wonderful example of being a strong individual. So the historical context, methods, means, and the implementation of the Great Migration Project, it examines the lack of representation in areas of civic decision-making, the discriminatory selection processes of public art and exhibitions and funding, disparities in health, wellness, and recovery, outreach, and placemaking for Arizona Blacks in light of the Great Migration. In some cases, solutions are offered to the proper authorities to remediate these ongoing disparities. So if you grew up in Arizona, I want you to ask yourself, what were you taught about the Great Migration in school? Probably little or nothing. Generally, when the topic of the Great Migration comes up, it's obviously it's known that Black people migrated from the deep South to other places, and they typically say for opportunities. However, they talk about Harlem and they talk about Detroit and Chicago, but the Southwest is typically not mentioned. And Black people did come to the Southwest. Author Donald Guillory, and these are 3 of his books on the side here, wonderful author. Donald Guillory states in his TEDx University of Mississippi talk, and you can find that on YouTube. And I believe that this is a very profound statement. Personal narratives are the individual threads that help make up the fabric of humanity. The fabric of humanity. African Americans are often dehumanized, which has contributed to the generational stigmas that, and I'm sorry, but I'm having a problem with my screen, generational stigmas that often go untreated. They cause other emotional issues, but they go untreated, and they are depressing and they are degrading. And so, because of the experiences of African Americans, because they've been so stigmatized, as stated in Dr. Guillory's presentation, many don't want to tell their experiences and thoughts because they believe that no one wants to hear them. And as James Baldwin said, even if I should speak, people would not believe me because they know what I would say is the truth. Schools, textbooks, media, and lawmakers, they've long controlled the discourse around American chattel slavery and the lingering after effects of Jim Crow, domestic terrorism, segregation, racial biases, and innumerable disparities. Emancipation Arts initiated this anthology because the simple process of speaking is healing and empowering. And I am going to read just a short selection from Abyssinia, from the book, and it is titled Abyssinia Bound by Bruce Nelson. And Bruce is a historian that focuses on Mesa and has some fascinating exhibitions. When my mom was in her early 90s, I started taking her to an adult daycare facility where she could socialize with folks her own age. One day I arrived early to pick her up. I spotted her sitting with another Black woman around her age, and the two of them were laughing so hard and contagiously that everyone nearby couldn't help but join in. I went over and asked a staff member what was so funny. The woman said she didn't know, but it had something to do with a mule and a wagon. After I collected my mom, we got in the car. I asked her what the two of them were laughing about. She said, that mule, oh Lord, a jackass is what he was, and the wagon traveling along the cotton belt to Abyssinia. Then she just stopped talking about it. She never did give the full details about the mule and the wagon, just that it happened. However, a cousin offered an explanation about the mule and wagon. He remembers hearing the old folks say that if a mule didn't want to move along the road, they would rub liniment between the mule's legs. Makes sense. That surely would burn and make a mule move. Mom wasn't very clear about parts of the story, but apparently, once the congregation reached Arizona, they stopped in several predominantly Black towns. When they arrived in Gila Bend, the pastor and his congregation decided to stay a while. Some folks decided they were going to live in Gila Bend, so they hunkered down and began to homestead property. That is an example of how Black people moved to Gila Bend. And also, it shows very clearly that frequently older generations don't want to talk about their experiences because they don't believe anybody wants to hear them. So the reason that I called the project The Great Migration Indiscernibles in Arizona is indiscernible, of course, means that you're incapable of being discerned. You're not recognizable as distinct. So the impact of the Great Migration in Arizona has had little acknowledgement, leaving Arizona African American residents locked into an indiscernible status. Blacks are never given consideration as freedmen, migrants, or refugees, and are therefore denied the empathy, stature, access to histories and justice other groups have come to expect, which has deprived Black Arizonans of a sense of belonging. And so I'm going to give a couple of examples of how history has kept Black Arizonans out of the narrative, okay? And an example of, oops, I'm trying to move something on my screen. An example of an inaccurate and incomplete history relative to Black Arizonans is the oft-repeated story that has more recently been widely circulated that Mary Green was the first Black woman to settle permanently in Arizona in 1868. People of African descent in the Americas have been omitted from the history of the Western United States. Not all fugitive slaves went north or to Canada. Certainly, you might want to research John Horse. Many of them went to Mexico. However, the Asiento de Negro certainly made it profitable for Britain and Spain and even the Dutch and other countries to bring Blacks into South America. And many enslaved people became fugitives. They ran away, okay? And so there is a history of Black people migrating from one of the largest slave ports in the Western Hemisphere, Veracruz, Mexico. And it's often taught also that homelessness began after emancipation and through the Industrial Revolution and the Great Depression of the 1930s in this country. Blacks have always experienced homelessness in this country, from the floating prisons that brought them to this country to the lack of support and shelter after the so-called Emancipation Proclamation. A sense of permanence has been withheld. And if we look at the Emancipation Proclamation, and I'm trying to move this thing out of the way, and I hereby enjoin upon the people declared, and I can't see that part either, declared to be free anyway, to abstain from all violence unless in necessary self-defense. And I recommend to them that in all cases, when allowed, they labor faithfully for reasonable wages. By the President Abraham Lincoln, William H. Seward, Secretary of State, on January 1st, 1863. Now, we know how the concept of laboring for reasonable wages worked out. And we know how a lot of the infrastructure of this company came about as well. Oops. So if you grew up in Arizona, I want you to ask yourself what you were taught about segregation in school, if anything. Phoenix codified segregation in parks, swimming pools, theaters, grocery stores, restaurants, cemeteries, upscale subdivisions, maintained restrictive covenants to uphold their whites-only status. Now, the word upscale is codified language as far as I'm concerned, okay? Upscale typically means that it is a whites-only area. Doesn't have to be all that nice or fancy, but it means that Black people are not welcome there. In most areas of the city, however, it was simply understood that African Americans, as well as other minorities, lived south of Van Buren Street. Now, where it says it was simply understood, how is such an understanding made broad? It is made broad through force. Okay, so if you are in what's considered a white part of town, you might be arrested, you might be beaten, and you know, it was very typical to have sundown towns in Arizona. That means when the sun goes down, you cannot be in that part of Phoenix or Scottsdale or Flagstaff or wherever. You cannot be there under the threat of violence or arrest. Now, one of the individuals that, in my opinion, is a hero is Hazel B. Daniels. And he was the first Black to graduate from the University of Arizona Law School. And he was the only African-American attorney in the state for 12 years. Can you imagine how lonely that might have been? Can you imagine how preoccupied with things he might have been? He established the momentum that desegregated Arizona schools by demonstrating to voters the financial impracticality of maintaining separate school systems in Phillips versus Phoenix Union High School and Junior College District. The US Supreme Court used the ruling to inform the landmark Brown v. Board of Education. And certainly we should have his likeness, and he should be a subject of study in schools all throughout our state. You know, this is Booker T. Washington School on the left, 1201 East Jefferson Street. And my family lived within that area. And it was one of the first segregated schools for Black Phoenix school children. But if we look at how Black history is commemorated with our structures, there are very few. This structure now is the New Times building, which is a shame to me. So also, Dunbar Elementary School, it was built in 1925. And I'm going to read from Remembering Willa May from the book. Just 1 second, please. And this is by Patsy Oliver. Oops. Here we go. Here we go. We lived like gypsies, once with Texas, New Mexico, California, and Arizona our stomping grounds, following the crops all through the Southwest, living in one-room shacks in the camps, picking, chopping, plucking, beets, cotton, peaches, tomatoes, onions, from Buttonwillow or Tulare, California to Waco, Texas, and back to Phoenix. Such long drives and backseat packed almost to the ceiling. Country music playing softly on the radio and darkening skies giving an intimacy where none existed before. Me and my younger brother, Jesse, lay on our bellies looking out the back window at the black ribbon of highway speeding out, following the crops with our young mother and her man until it didn't work anymore. And we found ourselves stranded and alone in Waco, Texas, about 1951. Even harder times quickly overtook us and Mama reached out to Granny for help. Thanks to Granny, we rode the Hound to Phoenix. While I don't remember the bus ride, I do recall living with Granny on Jefferson Street, walking to school and East Lake Park. Me and Granny clashed soon after our arrival. Being the oldest, I could and would not give up my position without a fight, nor would Mama give up her freedom to be in charge of her own life. We did not stay long with Granny, but quickly got settled on Wood Street and 16th, still picking cotton on the weekends. And another excerpt from Arkansas to Arizona, Life as a Teenager. And this is by Shirley Johnson. I graduated from Percy L. Julian in May of 1955 and enrolled at South Mountain High School, where I spent the next 4 years. Although South Mountain was integrated, Blacks still faced many challenges. Most of South Star athletes were Black males, yet Black females were never chosen for the cheerleading and pom-pom squads. During my senior year, approximately 10 Black girls marched to the front office and demanded to speak to the principal. He refused to speak with us, but sent the assistant principal to inform us he would only meet with 2 people from our group. We chose 2 outspoken students, a senior and a junior, to meet with him, while the rest of us remained outside the office area. At the end of the school year, South's first Black cheerleader was chosen. And one more, this is Circumstances by Covey Whitaker. Oops. The circumstances that brought my family to Arizona are part historical and part fate. Looking back, no one could have foreseen that one woman's life would have become part of one of the largest internal migrations in world history. When the lumber town of McNairy was moved from Louisiana to Arizona in 1924, word spread throughout Louisiana and the East Texas area that good jobs and great weather awaited hardworking Black loggers and were willing to board the trains and seek adventure in Arizona. My mother, Doris V. Whitaker, had cousins that made the move. Eventually, my mother's 2 oldest sisters made the move also. The idea of streetcars and an abundance of job opportunities sounded exciting for my mother, so she came to Phoenix to see if she liked it. She stayed for a while, but eventually returned to East Texas, Nacogdoches to be exact. This was a good thing for me because it gave her the chance to meet and marry my father, M.C. Whitaker, and welcome me into the world. And these are some of the experiences we never hear about in the orations of Arizona's historians, most of them. So the lack of cultural environments in which to meet and appreciate African-American artists, experience art and culture from throughout the diaspora is sorely felt by Black people in Phoenix, which is another factor that contributes to the feeling of not belonging. Black people have always and continue to lack representation, which is why books like Indiscernibles in Arizona are so important. So in order to get a copy of the book, you can get it at Heritage Square Museum Store, or you can contact me via email. And if you grew up in Arizona, ask yourself, what were you taught about the origins of rock and roll? After Jim Titus, Hadley Madley Morrell was the second Black DJ on white Arizona radio station KRIZ. Hadley Madley Morell was able to effect cultural crossovers by bringing soul music to Phoenix and provide exposure for local talent. The opportunities for local talent have dried up, which is why many Black musical artists have and continue to move to other cities. Oops. And the Great Migration, a standard of the Great Migration was that Black people brought their music with them. The stigma of the cotton fields has followed gospel, blues, soul music, resulting in the rejection of their birthright music by many Black people. This massive disconnect from Seminole Black culture is often represented in crass appropriations, regardless of how ubiquitous they have become online or on television, radio, and nightclubs. Unabashed mimics of Black singers, I won't name their names, in speech and mannerisms are not equivalent with the genre. It's tantamount to vocal blackface. It is difficult to know if they are perpetuating a joke that this writer does not understand or appreciate. And that is from my manuscript. So additional, whoops, let me just go back to this. I got to tell you, everything I do has got to have some music to it. All right. And if you grew up in Arizona, I graduated from high school in the 70s. This was the jam. They don't know. They don't know. Okay, I'm not gonna, I don't want you to be worried about that, Yam. I'm not gonna do that for too long, but everything I do has got to have some music to it. So I have some other recommendations for reading, and they also are in the context of national history as well as our local history. 100 Years of Lynchings by Ralph Ginsberg. And you know, I missed something here. Let me just go back as to why this is important. All right, 100 Years of Lynching. I want you to look at this handbill. This handbill had representatives or agents, recruiters going out to Black towns and settlements, okay, recruiting Black people to come to Arizona, particularly the Phoenix area, because cotton was one of the major industries and one of the major things that built the wealth and infrastructure here in Arizona. And I'm going to read, and I want you to look at all of these places, but I'm going to read from The People Who Put the Funk in Funky Broadway by Spencer Howard. My family's migration began with my father, Barnes Bud Howard, leaving Point Blank, Texas for Oklahoma. He met my mother and moved to Los Angeles to work for Firestone Rubber, replacing white workers drafted there to fight in World War II. However, when the war ended, white workers returned to replace Black workers, who in turn were forced to make hard choices. For some, migration resumed. And a little bit more, some Oklahoma family members who migrated to Arizona in the 30s talked to my father about striking gold, white gold. His leaving the family in Los Angeles, Dad secured employment and housing with a local farmer. He picked us up at the train station in Coolidge, Arizona, with a flatbed truck in the middle of July, a shock to the system of children who had grown up in the city. This began our painful introduction to the Arizona desert, sun and life on the cotton farm of Melvin Gamage for the next 13 years. Melvin Gamage was the brother of former ASU president Grady Gamage and the namesake for Gamage Auditorium. Now, unfortunately, I don't know how long I've been talking, so I'm going to have to get you to.
You have about 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, all right. I'm going to also tell you about some future engagements. Okay. And one of them is Something from Nothing, the art of Sebastio Pereira. I am also a curator, and so I will be curating that show at Changing Hands Bookstore in Phoenix. And the reception will be on Sunday, January 28th from 3 to 7 p.m. It will feature live music from True Flavor Blues. And it's part of something I call Sunday Vibing with Clottee, because frequently the only time that Black people locally get to see live musicians, particularly Black musicians, is if they go to the church or the bar. It's not intergenerational the way it used to be. And so I hope that people will come out and we will have some good conversations and enjoy two wonderful forms of art. Also, the Great Migration Indiscernibles in Arizona workshop and discussion. It's live or online. And those dates will be announced later on, and it will be at Heritage Square. Also, the traveling exhibition can be booked through Heritage Square, or you can contact me through my email address. March 30th from 10 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. will be the quintessential soul concert. And that is, a concert that will celebrate music from throughout the diaspora. We will have Yoruba drumming, steel pan, wonderful soul music, and various other types of entertainment, a full day of local musicians. And I'm going to turn back to this other page just in case people wanted to copy down these other references. And you're going to tell me, hopefully, I want everybody that's watching right now, get up off your seat. They don't know. They don't know. Okay, I hope everybody heard him say in Phoenix, Arizona, they're doing the Funky Broadway. And I'm gonna stop my screen sharing now, if that's okay, yeah.
Actually, well, first off, thank you so much. But before you do, could you possibly go back to the screen that had your contact information, so that folks can write down your email address if they'd like to purchase the book and
No
the
problem.
accompanying CD?
No problem. Let me see. Let me find it. Here it is.
Yes. Maybe we could just leave that open for a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, if you don't mind. You could even make that a big screen if you like,
Oh, no
just to make
problem.
it easier.
No problem. Here we go.
Great, great. Well, thank you again so much. I learned so much, and I'm sure everybody else did too. Okay, so let's go through some comments and some questions. Let's see. Some folks were really, really excited about the music, by the way, so that was fantastic.
Well, I've got
Um,
to tell you about the music as part
yeah,
of being stigmatized and being Black in Arizona. When you go to other cities and meet other Black people and they hear you're from Arizona, they think you're square. They think you don't know what's happening. Okay. And I went to Catholic school. I went to St. Mary's Catholic School, and there wasn't too much danceable music uh, at the dances at that time. But I did love to hear Funky Broadway because I knew somebody was going to dance with me.
yeah, yeah. It's a great beat, definitely.
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's see. There's some wonderful comments here. Bruce Nelson joined us,
Oh,
still here,
yay.
and he shared his Facebook page. Let's see. Dr. I hope I'm saying this correctly, Treya Allen. Um, she shared a wonderful LibGuide that can help folks learn more about history. There are some great links on there. I would definitely recommend folks check that out. Let's see, what else? What else? What else? Um, uh, Anthony asked if you could tell us more about the Black towns that existed in Arizona.
If you've ever been to Sierra Vista, Randolph, and also I'm going to go back to um, I'm going to go back to a slide that showed the recruiting um, because, okay, right here, whoops, people came to think of Buckeye, Arizona as a Black town, okay? And if you look at how vast the cotton recruiting was, and it wasn't just cotton, it was citrus as well. Okay. But if you look at how vast it was, and of course, we didn't have cell phones or internet or anything like that, right? And so people were isolated and they began to form their own little communities in these areas. And because of being a sundown town and not having the ability to travel throughout various places, those communities basically were self-sustaining.
That makes a lot of sense.
They had to
Um,
be.
yeah, yeah. Um, Nico asked how to stay in touch about your different events, the events you shared, and maybe future ones. And so I know in the survey that we're going to share with everybody who attended today, they can sign up to receive updates from you. But what's the best way for maybe people who are watching this, the recording later on, for them to find out about future events? Is it also to email you or to go to your
Do
website?
that, or I have a Facebook page.
Okay.
Okay, so Emancipation Arts LLC.
Okay. So usual internet, uh, the internet ways. Okay, we have a question from Ryan. Hi, Clottee. Could you talk about the experience of receiving the submissions for the book? What was it like for you to read the stories as they came in? Thank you again so much for all the work you do and for always bringing the music.
Oh, thank you. It was very interesting because reading through the submissions, people were sharing the stories of their families. And frequently nowadays, genealogy, people want to find out who was the best, the first, the most successful. They don't share truthfully the hard stories. And a lot of things people really put their feelings into, not just their feelings, but they honored their ancestors, and they were grateful for the people that brought them to and through here during times that were very, very difficult. So sometimes it could be rather emotional.
Yeah. Mary asks if there are any parts of your book that take place in Flagstaff.
Hmm. Well, Flagstaff is mentioned, but not truly takes place there.
Yeah. So, I guess maybe to expand on that question, do you find that the people who are sharing stories in your book, that there are certain pockets of Arizona where they're maybe more concentrated, or is it really all
No,
over?
it's truly all over. It's truly all over.
Wow.
Because that's how people were recruited once again. As I mentioned earlier, McNary brought people, literally brought them here to do forestry work from Louisiana and from Texas. Okay, but in other places like Oklahoma and Arkansas and Texas, people were, they had recruiters that were essentially door knockers, handing out flyers and making all kinds of promises that turned out not to be true.
Mm.
That when they got here, they found there was really no place to live, there was no potable water, and disease was rampant.
Mhm. Wow. Wow. Um, um, Somebody else asks, were there any rebellions against the widespread discrimination?
Actually, I'll tell you about one that just yeah, there were some rebellions, but I'll tell you about one. Um, when blacks arrived here and they were working in the cotton fields, okay, the white cotton workers did not want to work with them. And because Hispanic cotton workers had been for centuries migrating with the crops, okay, they weren't always as available as the white workers and white owners wanted them to be. So what happened is the Farm Labor Service, they contracted a ship and they sent to Puerto Rico to bring those workers here. Okay. And we know Puerto Rico is not an agricultural center. And so and there were many stowaways. And when they got here, the white workers were displeased. They had been promised, the Puerto Ricans had been promised electricity and apartments and all kinds of, amenities. And when they got here, none of that was true. And they rebelled, and there was a riot. And because the white workers saw them and they were speaking Spanish, and many of them, many Puerto Ricans are Afro Hispanic. And the white workers were like, Black Mexicans, no, this isn't what we wanted. And so they were incarcerated at the county fairgrounds.
Wow. 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 Okay.
Yeah, so that's one instance of a riot.
Yeah. 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 Um, Another question, is the dearth of historical knowledge about Black Arizonans more so to do with Arizona's unique and troubling legacy of being essentially a Southern outpost in the West, or is it part of the broader problem of Black stories being ignored that is a sad nationwide pattern?
It is a combination.
Mm,
It is a combination of the two. Confederates brought their slaves with them. Okay. Mormons brought enslaved people with them. And so it is a combination of the two. And it's also a facet of who publishes the accounts.
yeah. Yeah. Which is why it's so important. I mean, books like Indiscernibles are so important because we need to capture, right, the multifacetedness of history and people's experiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations for people who maybe want to collect stories in their communities? How to get started, how to do it,
It
put
depends
together a book?
on it depends on, why they're doing it.
Mhm.
Okay. It depends on what resources they have to collect. Um, I did a workshop with some high school students from South Mountain High School, and they were able to talk to senior citizens about why they came to Arizona. And so it really depends on the purpose.
Okay. Okay. But so workshops of that kind are something that you like a service you offer or you're willing to do to if there's maybe someone or a group of people who want to preserve their community's histories, is that something they should do you have a I'm not trying to put you on the spot, just just wondering like if because there might be people who are here who want to do something similar
I,
to
I
Indiscernibles.
I did the workshop for the benefit of the students because we
Okay.
have an enormous generational chasm. And very often, young people do not have grandparents or senior citizens in their life.
Mhm.
However, the workshop was for the students to teach some interviewing techniques. And so they would be comfortable. So a 15-year-old would be comfortable talking to a 70-something-year-old.
Yeah.
But many of the engagements that I have involve collecting histories. So once again, it depends on what someone intends to do with it, what resources they may have, and how they go about outreach.
Mm.
Because I have to tell you that local news channels um, have reached out to me for different things. And when it goes on the air, it is heavily edited. And so I don't intend to talk to them anymore.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see if there's any other questions. A lot of people are really thanking you for this wonderful presentation. This is really wonderful. And let's see, do you want to maybe tell us about what you're working on next? Any other maybe new projects you have in the works or
I will be working on a documentary, um, and it will involve, once again, Black people that migrated to Arizona, a
wonderful?
documentary film.
That's really exciting. That's really exciting. Wonderful. Um,
I also have
oh,
a book
yeah,
coming out, which I wrote and illustrated, and it is for adults to read to children. It is about how young children process adult depression, and it's has some workshops that go along with it. about expressing ourselves in ways other than verbally. So we would be making art, we would be dancing together, we would be listening to music and writing poems and ways of expressing ourselves and certainly expressing our affection for each other.
That's wonderful. That's really exciting. So, one last question. How can we support or help with future projects?
Well, firstly, your interest is very much appreciated. And over the course of almost 30 years that I've been in Phoenix doing this, um, there has not been really funding or access. And so look around. And when you go to an art exhibition, notice, are there Black artists involved? Why not? When when you go to a music event or to a play, look around and ask yourself, why not? So if anyone has any interest of, getting together or talking in the future, I'm certainly available. Come on down January 28th, Changing Hands Bookstore.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so I think this is a good place to stop. I'm going to stop your share screen and
Okay.
share my screen one more time. Okay, here we go. Okay. Thank you very much for your time, Clottee, and to all of our attendees for joining us today. On the screen, there's a link to a brief survey that which will also be emailed to you. Your feedback is greatly, greatly appreciated. If you could take a few moments to fill it out, that would be wonderful. I've also dropped it in the chat if you'd like to do it right now. The recording for this presentation will be made available on our YouTube channel, so be sure to share the link with friends who may have missed today's presentation. And we hope to see you at future events or in our reading room. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.